The Maji Maji Rebellion, Africa's war against colonial exploitation. At the dawn of the 20th century, European powers had carved up nearly the entire African continent. German East Africa, a vast colony that included modern-day Tanzania, was under the iron grip of German rule. But in 1905, the people of this land rose up in one of the most remarkable and brutal anti-colonial revolts of the era, the Maji Maji Rebellion. More than just a war, Maji Maji was a moment of unity, defiance, and sacrifice. It was a battle against forced labor, economic exploitation, and colonial oppression. And though it was ultimately crushed, it carried important lessons for future liberation struggles. This is the story of the Maji Maji Rebellion. When Germany claimed East Africa in the 1880s, it imposed harsh colonial policies. Lands were seized, taxes were imposed, and African communities were forced to grow cotton for export instead of food for themselves. To extract as much wealth as possible, the Germans introduced a brutal system of forced labor. African men were beaten, imprisoned, and executed for failing to meet quotas. Hunger and poverty spread, while resistance simmered beneath the surface. The situation grew worse under Governor Gustav Adolf von Goetzen, who demanded even harsher enforcement of labor laws. But soon a spark would ignite the fire of resistance. The cause: spiritual revival and resistance. In 1905, a charismatic spiritual leader named Kinjekitile Ngwale emerged. He claimed to have received divine visions, telling him that the people could resist German rule with the power of sacred water, Maji. This Maji was said to turn German bullets into water and protect warriors from harm. It spread like wildfire, uniting different ethnic groups, including the Ngoni, Matumbi, Zaramo, and Luguru, who had never fought together before. Under Kinjekitile's guidance, the people prepared for war, believing they had supernatural protection. The Maji Maji Rebellion was about to begin. The first attacks began in July 1905, when rebels burned German cotton plantations and attacked colonial outposts. The Germans, caught off guard, suffered initial defeats. The rebellion spread across southern and central Tanzania, with warriors using guerrilla tactics, ambushes, and raids. German garrisons were set ablaze and colonial officials fled. But the Germans struck back with brutal force. Governor von Goetzen ordered a scorched-earth policy. Villages were burned, crops destroyed, and water sources poisoned. The rebels who relied on local farms for food began to starve. The Germans also exploited divisions among African groups, recruiting some as allies. In 1907, after 2 years of resistance, the rebellion was crushed. Kinjekitile had been executed early in the war, and without food or reinforcements, the fighters could not hold out. Between 200,000 and 300,000 Africans died, either in battle from starvation or as victims of massacres. The German response was one of the most brutal counterinsurgency campaigns in colonial history. Yet despite its failure, the Maji Maji Rebellion changed everything. It shattered the illusion that colonial rule was unchallenged. The sheer scale of the rebellion proved that Africans were willing to fight for their freedom. It laid the groundwork for future resistance. Many African nationalists decades later looked to Maji Maji as a source of inspiration in their fight for independence. It exposed colonial brutality. Even in Germany, debates arose about the extreme violence used to suppress the uprising. The Maji Maji Rebellion was not just a tribal uprising, it was a class struggle against imperialist exploitation. The Germans imposed a colonial economic system that robbed Africans of their labor and resources to feed European industries. The forced cotton cultivation was a classic case of capitalist extraction, where the surplus value created by African workers was stolen by the colonial bourgeoisie. Maji Maji also demonstrated the power of unity among the oppressed. Different ethnic groups, despite historical divisions, came together to fight a common enemy. This unity, so often prevented by colonial rulers, showed that class consciousness could override ethnic barriers. However, The failure of the rebellion also underscores an important lesson. Spiritual belief alone is not enough to defeat imperialism. The Maji warriors fought courageously, but their lack of modern weaponry, centralized leadership, and strategic alliances limited their success. Future liberation movements learned from this, combining ideology, organization, and armed struggle to overthrow colonial rule. The spirit of Maji Maji lived on in later African revolutions, from the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya to the struggles for independence across the continent. The Maji Maji Rebellion was one of the first large-scale resistances against European colonial rule. Though it was crushed, it ignited the flame of resistance that would ultimately lead to Africa's liberation. Today, as Africa still grapples with neo-colonialism and economic exploitation, the lessons of Maji Maji remind us that true freedom requires both unity and strategy. If you found this story inspiring and interesting, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Untold Africa for more historical deep dives.